Thank you all for being here. I'm excited today that we have a special assembly to introduce our guest speaker today, Colonel Gary Steele. Now, you guys, I'm going to read the introduction, but some of you, we've had a little introduction to him already, as you saw the video 2 days ago from NFL Films. But Gary Steele, as a guy that when I went to West Point in the 80s as a football player, was one of those names that were right up there with the Heisman Trophy winners and others that were legendary in Army football lore. I first met him at an Army football golf tournament through his brother-in-law, and it's funny how, just like you guys at Williamson, the connections that you have and the network that you build. But Colonel Steele's wife's sister was married to my battalion commander when I was a captain. And so that's how I got to know. And Joe Miller was not only my battalion commander, but a former Army football player. And so I got to know the Millers pretty well. And so through Joe Miller, met Colonel Gary Steele. He was also, we had connected at different times through the year. When I was at the West Point Prep School as a deputy, Colonel Steele came down and talked to our cadet candidates down there. And then we ran into each other up at West Point around a football game a couple years ago, shortly after I had retired. And I was telling him about what I was doing now that I retired from the Army and about Williamson, and he was intrigued by it. And we continued to have the discussion. I said, I'd love to have you come and talk to our students and share some of your story and some of your life story, what you've done and how you've been able to become so successful. And so we're excited that he made the drive out from Carlisle, a couple-hour drive, was able to spend the night with us, and then took a tour today through the shop, so you might have seen him out there, and he's here to share some thoughts with you today. So I'm going to go through his kind of the rest of the story from what you saw earlier. Gary Steele graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School in Levittown, PA, and continued on to Manlius Military Academy in New York State. There he was awarded Best All-Around Athlete and participated in football, basketball, and track and field. He then received an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point. Steele was West Point's first African-American to earn a varsity letter in the sport of football and garnered 3 total letters in all. A second-team All-American as a tight end, he was a 17th round draft choice of the NFL's Detroit Lions. Steele also earned 4 varsity letters in track and field, 2 indoor and 2 outdoor, and even set an academy record with a high jump of 6 feet 9 inches. At graduation, and this is pretty impressive because I'll tell you, there's 1,000 cadets that graduate every year, and there's always really great athletes and different people that are excelled in different areas. But he was awarded the Army Athletic Association Special Award for Outstanding Achievement and Exemplary Leadership in Athletic Competition. And like I said, this is an award that isn't given out every year. It's, a lot of awards are every year they give it to somebody. This is one that they only occasionally give out, so I think that's noteworthy. He graduated from West Point in 1970 and commissioned into the infantry. And he served in the infantry for about 5 years before he transitioned into human resources leadership and operational support positions. As all Army families and colonels that are career folks, moved around a lot. And his international assignments took him to the Panama Canal Zone, to Greece, and to Belgium. After he retired with the rank of colonel, he then went on to his second career, and he had an exceptional career in the private sector. Immediately after leaving the military, he was appointed the Associate Superintendent for Human Resources for the Kansas City, Missouri schools. And then after that followed a position as Director of Human Resources and Training with Citizens Communications in Connecticut. And in '98, he joined Pfizer Pharmaceuticals in New York City as Director of Human Resources for Europe, North Africa, and Middle East for their animal health business unit, and then moved on to as Director of Organizational Effectiveness in the Office of the Vice Chairman at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals headquarters in New York City. He's earned a master's degree in international relations from Boston University and holds a number of human resources organizational effectiveness related certificates. He was also inducted into West Point's Army Sports Hall of Fame in 2013. He lives in Carlisle, Pennsylvania with his wife Mona, and they have 3 adult children and 5 grandchildren? 5 grandchildren. And I'm just very excited. I think we're all excited that he took the time out of his busy schedule to come out here and spend some time at Williamson and spend some time with you. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Colonel Gary Steele.
Okay, I'm live. Can you hear me in the back? Yes. Okay. So I have to tell you that something wrong? I heard noise over here. What was that? We're good? Yeah, we're good. Okay, we're good. Thought I did something wrong. I haven't even started. You know, what are they going to do? I have to tell you before I do get started how everything I'm going to say to you today is going to be from the heart. Let's start with that. But I want to tell you how in awe I am of this physical plant, of this school, of this opportunity. This is fantastic. And before Mike introduced me to it, you know, a few years ago, I'd never heard of Williamson. But this is absolutely incredible. And I hope you all who are here today appreciate it. I know you do. It's tough. It's a tough place to go through, and with all the, gotta wear a tie, what's that? But wow, this is great. So thank you, Mike, and thank you, staff, for what you do. But most importantly, thank you, and you should thank yourselves for the job that you're doing here at Williamson. I said to a couple of folks today, our country does not understand how it really works. The underpinnings of the success of our country. And the success of our country, I really believe, comes from right here. You guys are the ones that are holding this country together. The rich folks, they don't get it, right? You are today and you are the future. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it really, really well, because we need you. I'm going to talk today. Oh, the other thing that I have to say, Mike, very good job on reading the bio that I sent in to you. Didn't he do a great job? Let's give him a hand. I sent that in and all of that stuff, and I said, Mike, here's a couple things, you know, read what you want. Because I wanted him to pick out the things that he felt might be important for you. This is what I'm going to kind of talk about today, accepting your challenges and the value of adversity. Each of us in our lives is, you know, you probably already have had adversity. You've probably fallen and scraped your knees and everything else, but you've gotten up. And you're here today, and that speaks to that point. From the bio that Mike read, you might say, this guy, man, he's really been successful. He's really done a lot of things. But, you know, let me suggest that success is often not measured by where you are on an organization chart. Oh, he was a director of this organization effectiveness, or the accolades associated with the position, or sometimes even the money, the compensation that you get. But one definition of success could be it's all about the small wins on the road that you take to get there. Before I really get going today, I need to kind of do a level check. And this is the one time I think I'll walk off the stage. And I'm going to ask for some honest self-assessment and opinions. I'm going to ask 3 questions. And you can raise your hand if you want to, and I'd like you to, because I need you to, because it goes into the next thing I'm going to talk about. So go with me, guys. So first question is, how many of you were a little unsure of yourself when you made the decision to go to Williamson, you know, about what you were going to do for the next year or 2 or 3? How many of you were a little bit unsure? Okay, yeah, okay, good. Thank you. How many of you in the last year or 2 have really faced some challenges here at Williamson. Okay? All right? And then the tough question, staff, faculty, close your eyes and ears. How many of you actually thought about leaving Williamson? Whoa, more hands. Okay, staff and faculty, you can open your eyes now. I ask you those questions for a reason, because I wanted to see how many of you had the exact same thoughts that I did some 50 plus years ago. I came out of high school, I ended up going to a military prep school, and then I went into West Point. So the same three questions. I was really unsure. I faced some challenges, which I'll talk about, and boy, did I want to quit. I'll tell you. There are some things that happened that really kind of, knocked me for a loop, and some of the things were obviously, self-taught, self-caused, but, you kind of get through it. So I have three areas I want to share with you this morning, and and I think each of those areas will become clear to you as they're revealed. To begin with, I feel tremendously blessed in my life to have had the opportunity to attend West Point and to have had access to the opportunities that came to me post-graduation in the military and in my civilian life. I'm definitely tremendously blessed. But, you look at me, old guy, thinning here, you can tell that I am a child of the 60s. As was mentioned in the bio, I went to West Point. I graduated in 1970, but my connection to West Point really goes way back. It goes way back to the 1940s. Well, how does that work? Well, you think my dad, right? Well, my dad was at West Point in the 1940s, but he was not a cadet. My father was in the 10th Cavalry. That was an all-black, a segregated unit that worked at West Point at the time for many, many years. And their job was to train, care for, and take care of the horses. Because back then, horses were a part of the military, that's kind of one of the things that we did. You remember, you see those old movies, the guys riding in and out west. And so the cadets had an equestrian curriculum as a part of their coursework at West Point. The military, from a historical perspective, I don't know if you know this, you may, the military was segregated until 1948. Very interesting. But, our country and the academy was very different back in that time. So you had men and women, African American and other ethnicities that actually, how's he doing there, right next to you? You good? All right, good. I have to do that, it's my training. Of all ethnicities who fought for our nation, but were not allowed to do the same things that everybody else was. So it's kind of a tough challenge. But Dad was there at West Point as I mentioned, in the 10th Cav, and he worked pretty hard. Dad ended up staying in the military for a full career, and he retired after 23 years. But at the academy, at that time, he was there in 1942. Out of a corps of cadets of around 1,500 to 2,000 at that time, there was one African-American cadet, just one. And his name was H. Minton Francis. Minton Francis graduated in 44, served in World War II, and in the Korean War, had a full military career. But if you can imagine the challenges that he had to endure as the only black cadet at West Point in a tough time. And I will tell you, I met Mr. Francis after I graduated, and he felt comfortable enough to share with me some of the challenges that he faced. It's kind of tough. But so my connection with West Point, my dad, Minton Francis. So let's now do a fast forward rewind from 1942, 1944 time frame to 1966. How many of you have had the opportunity to go to West Point, to visit up there? I see one hand, staff member, 2, 3, a few, okay, very few. If you get the time when you're not working on your internship this summer, take the time to go up to West Point and take a look at it. It is a real gem. It's a really neat place. I guess, maybe for old folks, but it's a really pretty cool place. And from here, I imagine 3 hours?
Just under 3.
Yeah, just under 3 hours. But here we are, football stadium, Mikey Stadium at West Point. It's September 1966. So the first quarter. In the huddle, Steve Lindell, the quarterback, he calls a play. Steve drops back. He throws a ball. And a pass was caught. Yeah, that's me. Look at that vertical, huh? It's got to be at least 6 inches. No, the pass was caught. For my parents and my godfather, who were sitting in the stands then, September 1966. This was history. Do you understand what I'm saying? This was history. I became, as you know from the clip you saw the other day, I became the first African American to play varsity football at West Point. I became the first African American letterman, et cetera, and all of that stuff. But for them, it was history. Think of everything that they'd been through from the time that they were children, born in the early 20s, and everything that they'd been through with our country, my dad in the segregated military force, my mom, having challenges and everything, to come to this moment when their son was playing ball there. History for them. For me, it wasn't history. I, quite frankly, was worried about this guy, right? He's about to clean my clock. He didn't. We ended up winning the game, and that season we were 8-2. Second season we were 8-2. Third season, because you could only play sophomore, junior, senior back in the day, we were 7-3. So we had a pretty good record at the academy. But the message here, first African American to play varsity football, and I'll tell you what, did I feel different or alone or ostracized? No. Everybody on the football team was what? Was my brother, right? Everybody on the football team was my brother. We did everything together. We studied together. We worked together. It was a great opportunity for me, and I enjoyed the opportunity to play ball at West Point, and I enjoyed everything that West Point gave me. So this was part one, guys. So putting the preceding in context for me, I'm here with you today basically because I'm standing on the shoulders of those who went before me. Make sense? Vertical head nods, please. Makes sense. I'm standing here today because I'm standing on the shoulders of the people who went before me. I'm standing on the shoulders of Minton Francis, West Point class of 44. I'm standing on the shoulders of my dad, Frank Steele, Buffalo soldier. These are men and women like them who helped me see a more distant horizon, something I couldn't imagine myself, but because of them, I could see further. I could do more. So, I have a question for you guys. You don't have to all answer at the same time. I don't want you to. But whose shoulders are you standing on? I looked over. Oh, there's Cody. Yeah. Whose shoulders are you standing on? Think about that as you do your time here at Williamson and as you move on in your lives. These things are very, very important. While I was a cadet at West Point, get back to some of the meat here, I struggled mightily with the academic departments. While some say that I was a Dean's List student, did you know that the dean at West Point, I think he may have had 2 Dean's Lists? You with me? There was this Dean's List, and then I think there was a Dean's Watch List. And I think he was kind of paying attention to me to make sure that I stayed on the up and up. This is obviously an updated picture that I made black and white because back when I was there, they didn't have these things. I was talking to a few folks just before we started, and I was talking about, I wonder, have you all ever had to fill out a card, and Mark sends a card when you go to do something, maybe to an application for something? Yes? No? No? Say again? Yes. Yeah, you have? So can you imagine trying to put together a program, a big engineering program with stacks of these cards, maybe 2 boxes of stacks, 2 boxes of cards, and you take it over to an academic computer center, and you turn it into a guy, and he says, okay, Cadet Steele, I will have your program run for you and back tomorrow afternoon. You guys now, you get on your whatever mobile device you have, you do a little bit of this, bam, and the answer's there. We went to the moon in 1969, but I think what is the phrase? If you have an Apple iPhone, there's more computing power in the Apple phone than was in the computers that we had at West Point and the computers that sent man to the moon. It's amazing how far we've come in all of these years. So I have to tell you, while this was a challenge, and it really was, the athletic side was easy. Oh, that kind of grade out there. I played football, and as was mentioned, indoor and outdoor track. Now, when you talk about jumping 6'9", I look up at that and I go, there's no way I got this booty over 6'9". But somehow it happened. Football was easy. Anybody know Levittown, Pennsylvania? Levittown? Okay, hand down. Truman High School? Okay. I went to, the predecessor was Woodrow Wilson High School. Went to Woodrow Wilson, and then went to prep school, as I mentioned, and then went to West Point. But Pennsylvania Big 33 football game, Pennsylvania, Texas, Pennsylvania, Ohio, was one there. I played in the Big 33. I was recruited as an athlete, and it's a tough shot. Who's this? I can't hear you. Louder. Joe Paterno. That's Joe Pa. Joe Pa was the Penn State coach who was recruiting me to go to Penn State. I had a full 4-year football scholarship to Penn State. This picture was taken right after Penn State beat Army. He came over and said hi to me and said, good game, blah, blah, blah. Penn State that day, at that time, was number 2 in the country. And it's funny how you remember things. You know, I remember we lost to them 24-28. They returned an onside kick for a touchdown. That's the only reason why the number 2 team won, because we were kicking their butts up and down the field all day. I got to see Joe Pa some years later. Our daughter went to Indiana University, and Penn State was out playing IU, and Sage hooked it up, so I got to see Joe Pa after the game. You know, what a great man. You know, what a great school. Penn State, just a really wonderful, wonderful education. But sports as a part of life, this was the easy part. The great part about what you're doing here at Williamson is you're combining both of those things. Because everybody, as I understand, has to be involved in some sort of an activity, right? Okay, so cadet, West Point, working hard academically, athletic side, easy, 3 sports. You know, I was having fun. You know, maybe I was having too much fun. So here comes the thing that might relate a little bit to the title of the presentation. There was a point in time when the hammer came down, big time. At the end of my junior year, I failed. I failed a couple of courses, electrical engineering and thermodynamics. You know, 2 subjects that I've used every day since graduation. Okay, I failed. And basically, when you fail, you get to take a reentrance exam, they call it. And if you pass that, you know, you're reinstated back into the Corps. But if you fail, you know, in my case 2, you fail either one of those, boom, you're gone. What the Academy did was they said, okay, and they still do it to an extent these days, is they said, we're going to offer you what's called a turn back status. I went freshman, sophomore, junior year, failed the 2 courses. They said, you can come back to the Academy in September, but you have to retake your junior year. Yeah, tough decision. How could I go back to West Point? How could I go back? Again, I told you everything that I'm going to say to you today is really coming from here. I graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School. Let's do the count. In 1964. We have any math majors in here? I went to Manlius Military School for a year. Okay? Entered West Point in 1965. Plus 4? 69. Okay? Hold that. My brother was a year behind me in high school. He came straight into West Point in 1965. His graduation year, 69. So we're going to graduate together, right? Freshman, sophomore, junior. Oops, Gary. Repeat your junior year. Mike, he's a smart one. Mike kept going. My younger brother, he's skinny, ran middle distance in track. My younger brother was good and smarter. He was going to graduate before me. So from a family perspective, I was like, oh man, okay? So Army football team, 8-2. 8-2. A lot of people talking, 2nd team All-American, right? So here's Steele. Fails these 2 courses. Got to repeat. Big man on campus, right? How could I go back and face that? Everybody thought so highly of me, but I failed. Man, it was tough. I was mad. I was pissed off. How could West Point do that to me? It took a lot of soul searching and talking with a number of people for me to realize that, well, maybe West Point didn't do that to me, right? I had 3 or 4 days I was given by General Rogers, the Commandant of Cadets, to think about what I wanted to do. Because if I leave West Point, then I was going to, boom, go right into a military unit. Because that's what they did back then, and go off to war or whatever. It was a Vietnam time frame. So I had that to look at. But I'm going, hey, I'm out of here. I didn't like this place anyway. I got this far. I still have another year of eligibility. I'm going to quit red shirt, call Joe Pa, right? And get in the game. I'm thinking about all of these things. And my dad, we're at home, lived in Jersey. My dad, he saw where I was mentally. He says, he's out of here. He's not going back. And so my dad stood up, started walking out of the dining room, and he stopped at the door, and he turned around, okay? I am you, remember? I am you. And he turned to me, and he said, Gary, if you quit West Point, we support you. Mom and I will support you. But I just want you to remember that means that West Point beat you. And he turned and he walked out of the room. Do you think that had an impact on my decision? Nobody beat me. Who? No way. So I made the decision angrily to go back to West Point, to repeat my junior year, to enter into a new class, to have my younger brother graduate before me, to stand up to the self-imposed embarrassment that I put on myself by the things that I did or did not do. Caused by me, no one else. So, let me tell you, electrical engineering and thermodynamics, they were just as hard the second time. They really were. But putting that in context for me, again, I had to decide what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I had to decide, was I going to quit? Was I going to go in the Army? Was I going to call Paterno, see if I could get back on with that? Or was I going to go back? I had to make a decision. You see, it's not always your successes in football, in the mechanical engineering shop, in the paint shop, in the mason shop. It's not always your successes, or when you're in high school, things that happen at home perhaps. It's not always your successes that define who you are. It could be what you do when you fail. Do you stay? Do you roll over, legs up? Or do you get up? Individual decisions, you've probably already had to ask yourself those questions, but these are the things that you have to think about. I imagine that you've had some crisis that has challenged you, and we already discussed this, in the past year or so. How did you face the challenge? Mike said there are 250, 260 young men here? 260? Because you're here today, I can just imagine that somehow you've got a little bit of this going on in your head. The cadet prayer. This is in the middle of the West Point cadet prayer. Make me to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong. And never to be content with a half-truth when the whole truth can be won. Words. But if you take on these words, maybe there's some meaning there for you. How many times as a cadet in the Army, in the civilian world, have I come to the proverbial fork in the road? Do I go right or do I go left? Have you had those? Another raise of hands. Have you come to the fork in the road at any time in the last 2 to 3 years? Where you, well, what do I do this way or do? Those that don't raise their hands ain't living. But you had to make a decision as to which way, excuse me, you were going to go. I want to bring up an example. Names not included, but I want to share with you. I have a friend who runs an oil and steel boiler fabrication company. You know, one of those places where, you know, the guys have to climb up inside of 250-foot chimneys, and they're inside it. He tells me these huge boilers, and they're checking welds, and you know, you guys are somewhat familiar with that. Big stuff, big safety issues. Well, he's the president. He owns this company. He had a son, has a son, who was a really accomplished welder. Now, you know, I'm out of my zone here, but, you know, a really, really good welder. And he asked Dad if he could, you know, maybe join the company. And Dad thought about it and said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give him a shot. He said, but you need to understand that here's what it's about here with this company. Here's what time you come to work. Here's what you wear. If you're on site, you know, you got to strap up, right? You got to do OSHA. I guess there's a lot of OSHA stuff going. You got to do all of these things. And, you know, we have mandatory drug testing. We have random drug testing. You know, there's all of this stuff that comes along with being in this, my company. So father and son discussed it. Son understood all of the criteria and rules and regulations that he had to stick with to stay with the company. Kind of like Williamson, right? Do you have a lot of rules and regulations? Don't you love them? North-south head nods, please. North-south, you love them. So he joined the company, was working with them, and since this is a, you know, the kind of presentation I'm giving, you probably already know the rest of the story. Random drug test, right? Positive result. Difficult father-son conversation. Now, Dad owned the company, right? He probably could have, you know, hey, look, it's my son, you know, and we, you know, right? Probably could have done that. Hope this is right here. Whoops, not quite there yet. Probably could have done that, but he didn't. He had the difficult conversation, and he terminated his son. Terminated his son. Not physically, just in a, you know, in a business sense. He felt compelled to let him go. He had to let him go. He had said, this is what the rules are. The son agreed to the rules. The son did not follow the rules. Son/employee. So what do? Boom, you let him go. Harder right, easier wrong. Can you do it? So you're 18, 19, 20, maybe 21 years old. Can you do it if you're in a position of responsibility and supervision? Can you do it, is the question. Have I had to do that, play that, the dad role, the leader role? Yes, I have. In the military, good guy, worked for me, was my head of personnel records, you know, super guy. Bam, had to let him go. Because there's certain things that you just have to do. For the good of the organization, and quite frankly, for the good of the individual. You know, sometimes you got to get knocked down before you get back up and succeed and move on to succeed. So, I'm moving to the end, guys. I just ask you to continue believing in yourself. You're going to face many, many challenges. I'm 72 years old. I remember being 19 and 20 years old. I remember that. And I'm like, oh man, I got this. This is my world. And everybody's got to, do what I want them to do. I didn't realize all of the stuff that I was going to have to deal with. But now that I'm here and I'm looking back, I'm looking at myself sitting here, I realize that, gosh, I just wish that I had listened a little bit more to this person or that person. I just wish that I had not extended myself as much as I did at certain times. And sometimes it was, I wish that I had made quicker decisions. There are more things in front of you than you can possibly imagine. The words from the West Point Cadet Prayer, in my mind, I kind of liken it to like a beacon. If you're on some foggy or stormy waters, those of you who might be into sailing or whatever, when it's really, oh God, it's really tough out there, you have the words from the West Point Cadet Prayer. Make me to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole truth can be won. When you have those words sitting out there in front, those words can be the beacon that keeps your ship from crashing onto those rocks. You have to hold on to something, whatever it may be. So putting it into context for you, you know the right thing. Damn it, you just need to go ahead and do it. Are you with me? Hello, are you with me? Yes. Okay. So, brothers, sisters, don't doubt Williamson. Don't doubt this opportunity that you have. It's just where you want to be. You're here with me. It's quite frankly, it's just where you need to be at this point in time. I was with some folks this morning, and I was asking them, okay, what's your 10-year plan? 10 years for you guys, it's lights out. So then I backed it down a little bit, didn't I? I said, okay, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 3-year plan? I had a boss that used to tell me, Steele, plan your work, work your plan. You got to have a plan, even where you are today. Williamson is just where you need to be. Think of the connections that you've made in your time here, in your freshman year, or your junior or senior year. Think of the connections you've already made. Just listening to some of you this morning, you're talking about, hey man, these guys are great. Yeah, they're really good. I really love it. And while the words that I'm going to give you now may fall on deaf ears to some, I just want you to remember, you don't have to remember my name, that's unimportant, but just remember the tall guy that came to talk to you, who told you, and I want you to do this now, look to your right, at the person to your right. Yeah, I know you've done this game before. And look to your left, okay? Look at the person, don't just look. Look at the person behind you. Look at the person that's right behind you, okay? Okay, let them see you guys. Don't let them look at the back of your head. But, this is your brotherhood. I'm standing here and I'm telling you that history has a funny way of repeating itself. It truly does. Remember earlier in the conversation, I was talking about this guy, 1966. Steve Lindell was a quarterback. He's from Minnesota. We went to Manlius together, went to West Point together, played ball. He graduated in 1969 because he didn't have to mess with electrical engineering and thermodynamics like I did. He graduated ahead of me. But Steve Lindell was a quarterback. Steve Lindell was a gentleman that threw me that pass. History repeats itself, and the people that are sitting to the left of you, to the right of you, in front of you, and behind you, you may be connected to them 50 years from now. That's 1966, the first shot here. This is 50 years later. I get emotional here. That's my quarterback. We're up at West Point for a reunion, and that's Steve on the left, little short white guy. Yeah. And that's me on the right, all right? 50 years later. So you look around and you see the people that you're dealing with here today. God, think about that. Help me with the math. 50 years, when the hell is that? 68? 2068? 2068. Yeah, whoa. You guys, if you work this right, you may still be bumping into each other, and you'll still be brothers, whether you're in horticulture, whether you're in masonry, whether you're in carpentry, no matter what program you're in. So almost done. Take the time to work these relationships because they are very, very meaningful, and it's really a joy for me. Steve lives out north of Sacramento, California. We speak once a month. Gary Marshall, who was a wide receiver when I was playing, he lives in San Diego, California. These guys go to warm weather. We connect once a month. Kenny Johnson, first team All-American linebacker for the football team. September, I was playing golf with him in Tennessee with Pete Denker, who's a defensive back. Okay? We're still connected 50 years later. So the connections that you're making now worked right, and they will repeat. Okay, coming to closure, okay? So what are your takeaways? I say there are three. First, you're standing on somebody's shoulders, somebody who went before you. Take the time, not instantly, but think about whose shoulders are you standing on. You're where you are because somebody was before you, pushing you. Second takeaway, how are you going to live the rest of your life? It's not always your successes that define you, but it could truly be what you do with your failures that define who you are. I think that I've laid out a few failures on my part, but I cried about it. I did. But I said, okay, I have a choice. And I moved forward. Gentlemen, you already know the right thing to do. You just need to go ahead and do it. There were circumstances and situations where Gary Steele knew the right thing to do. Did he do the right thing? No. But this is something that becomes, it's like an amoeba, I guess. It kind of crawls over you, all of these things. And then pretty soon, you get to a state in your life where you know the right thing to do. It's going to be the hard decision. Hard? Does that come back again? The harder right? But you go ahead and you do it. So, I want to thank you, Mike, and the staff for the opportunity to come and share some old man thoughts with you. But remember what I did at the beginning, those 3 questions. I am you. You may be me someday. As we close, I thought about this, and I asked Mike to make a copy of the entire West Point Cadet Prayer. Let's not look at this as a religious thing. Let's look at this as a possible signpost for you. That beacon that I was talking about, they're available in the back, and is someone going to? Yeah, someone's going to hand them out. Take it. That harder, right, easier, wrong thing is bolded in the middle. But sometime in the next couple of days, just take a few minutes and read this thing. Take 3 or 4 minutes in your fast life to read all of the words here. There may be something that really catches you. This is super. I wish that I had had it ingrained in me earlier. Because when I left West Point, I was like, yeah, man, I'm a 2nd lieutenant. And back then there weren't any women, at the academy. Where are the girls? Okay? But it took a little while. It took a little while for all of these things to kind of get into me. But it's in me now. And, so just a little advertising. If you haven't had the opportunity to get to West Point, and I see 99.3% of you haven't had that opportunity, with your family, by yourselves, with your brothers, with the crew, take that opportunity to go up. It's kind of a neat place. I know you saw the clip the other day. My life there's been a lot of things in my life that have happened. Hopefully, my conversation with you today filled in some of those gaps. If you have some questions about that, you doing that? 2 minutes. Yeah, we've got just a couple of minutes. I'll answer some questions, but also, I'm going to be at lunch, so if you, Mike, we'll talk about that. So, right now, quick draw. Any questions that come to mind immediately? You can't leave without one. There's one.
You know the whole prayer by heart?
Pardon me?
You know the whole prayer by heart?
You realize that's 53 years ago? I know a lot of it. And I will get things out of order. Oh God, our Father, our searchers of men's hearts, help us to draw near to thee with sincerity and truth. May our religion be filled with gladness. May our worship of thee be natural. Strengthen and increase our admiration for honest dealing and clean thinking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of long, but there's so many good words in there. Okay, that was one. We have one here.
Yeah, going back to West Point, what was your day-to-day mindset?
When I went back, I'm going to beat these sons. They got me. They're not going to get me again. They're not going to get me. It was a struggle. It was a struggle. It really was. But I was determined to get through it. One here.
How come you decide not to go to Penn State?
How could I decide in the beginning not to go to Penn State? It's funny, because back then, when I went up to Penn State, they said, Gary, we feel that you may have the physicality, and you may be able to play professional football. You see, back then, and the money's different, but back then, a professional football player would get a signing bonus of $20,000. Okay, what do they get now? Whatever. So football for me was fun. It was really a lot of fun. And I was bigger, stronger, faster, I guess, than my contemporaries at the time. So it was relatively easy for me. So, you know, I saw West Point. My dad was in the Army, and I saw the kind of life that we had. And we lived in Germany. We came back to the States for a few years. Then we lived in Japan. You know, so I'm going, this is pretty good, you know. I'm not in Levittown, Pennsylvania. Not that it was bad, but, you know, I could go places and do things. I'd say join the Army, see the world, or join the Navy, see the world. So, but I really did want to go to Penn State, but somehow I convinced myself, probably my dad convinced me that I needed to try West Point, you know what I'm saying? But for me, it ended up being obviously a challenging decision, but one that worked out for me. And because of that, I get to stand in front of you today. So.
All right. How about a round of applause for